Hello, everybody.
Happy Hump Day.
Happy Hump Day. Welcome back.
We're back.
This is episode 2 of the Below Average Joe's podcast. The first of what we're, for now, just calling our kind of special videos. Videos that aren't really relating to kind of the current events of MMA world. We're not recapping or previewing an upcoming card. We're not talking about any news. These are just topics that are going to give you a better idea of what we think as fight fans. And for those of you that are new to the sport or casual fans looking to learn more, or even if you're a diehard fan just trying to compare opinions, you're going to get an idea of when we're looking at the history of the sport, detailing a lot of our knowledge and giving our opinions on different things. And today that's going to start with our top 10 for UFC fighters of all time.
This is big.
It's the GOAT talk.
Now listen, here's the thing. This is all opinion based, right? So we haven't even shared our lists with each other. So we're going to piss each other off probably a little bit. People listening, if you don't agree, list your top 10 in the comments.
Yeah.
Let us know. We want to know what everybody thinks. And these are always subject to change. Literally, and I know Noah's going to touch on this, but this Saturday, there's a potential huge fight for GOAT ranking. Let's be honest. So this is, as of right now, how we feel. Always subject to change, always opinion-based, but it's going to be a good one.
Sure. I guess before we get into this, just how are you doing? How are you doing?
How am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Just kind of living life, enjoying it. I'm telling you, man, I'm excited. I don't know if everybody listening has gotten a hold of our first episode, but stop right here if you haven't. Go check that one out first, then come back to this one.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun recording that one.
It was great.
Obviously, it was new. It's the first episode, the pilot episode, but being able to kind of recap that last Saturday's fight card, talking about some of the news going on in the world right now, and then kind of giving them plugs. We're slowly creeping towards that preview episode for Friday.
Oh, man.
That we're so excited about. So
can't wait.
It's a very exciting time for us right now, starting this new thing, and we really appreciate the support.
We hope you guys are enjoying it. We hope you enjoyed episode 1, and I think you're really going to enjoy this one. I think this is going to be fun.
I agree. So I guess without further ado, we're going to
are we getting into it?
Well, I do want to start by making it clear that these are rankings based on fighters' UFC performance.
Yes, UFC only.
And the reason we're doing that is because that's really the only promotion that we feel comfortable enough to do these rankings based off of.
Now, I will preface, just because I have a couple fighters on my list that have performed in others, but also dominated in the UFC, I'll briefly mention successes in previous.
That's fair.
But we're focusing solely on
That's fair.
UFC. We're not taking people that fall only in Pride and never anywhere else.
Fedor will not be on this list.
Right, exactly.
And
he's great.
And even I was thinking of guys that were dominant in Pride, because really that was the other organization that I really thought of when it came to GOAT rankings.
Yep.
Fedor would probably be in a top 10 MMA fighters of all time. You had guys like Vanderlei Silva, who was dominant in Pride, comes to the UFC and doesn't quite have that level of success.
Right.
Mirko Krokop, another one.
Instead, he got Krokopped.
Yes, he did. Shogun Hua, a guy who's still fighting in the UFC today.
Right.
But these are guys that, while great fighters and did have success in the UFC, especially Shogun, light heavyweight champion at one point. I just don't feel like it was fair to we haven't delved that deep into
other organizations.
Yeah, so I think it's only
fair as deep.
So I think it's only fair that we look at UFC only as it pertains to this list.
I think we'll do a good job of staying as unbiased as possible. In episode 1, we mentioned our feelings toward the Ohio boys.
Yes,
specifically Stipe and Cody, but I think we're going to be unbiased as possible in this list.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of factors in play when you're making a list like this.
It's hard.
It is hard because
people are going to be left out.
And I was before we started recording this, and we had talked about it for the last few days. I was considering talking to Dom, okay, we need to make the list inside these parameters. We need to agree. Is it just about when they were on top? Or is it about their longevity? Are we taking out PED users? Things like that. And then I went, no, I think it'd be more fun if we just had no caveats.
Yeah,
It's
just dive in.
yeah, so it's like just based on what we think. We have not talked to each other about our list really much at all. So I'm very curious to see what you do. And again, if you guys disagree with us or do agree with us, feel free to comment.
Yeah, I'd love to see other people's
I would really
lists.
like to too. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Feel free to call us assholes or idiots.
Well, hopefully not.
Or idiots because we don't know because we left your favorite fighter out. But
Yeah, prefacing nothing personal against any fighters. We're just literally going off who we think's the best. Don't matter what's happened, personal life or whatever. I'm already assuming that's hinting towards somebody on the list.
So so I guess we'll just go ahead and dive in here.
Let's do it.
Normally I would give you the floor, but
You're gonna take it?
I think I'm gonna take it.
All right.
So the way we're gonna do this, we're gonna go one by one.
Yep.
We'll each give our top 10, talk about it, then go from there. From 9, 8, 7, and so forth till we get to number 1. The reason I'm taking the floor is because I'm kind of cheating with my number 10 spot.
He's cheating.
Yeah,
Call him
I'm
out.
I'm cheating. I am. And I was gonna list out a lot of what's the word? My honorable mentions.
Yeah.
But
Too many
I
to
found
count.
that there was too many.
Too many.
So for my number 10 spot, it's in my opinion going to be the winner of next Saturday's fight.
Oh,
Next Saturday.
so excited.
And for now, because in order to still put a name in that spot, I'm going to say Daniel Cormier for now. Not because I think he's going to win on Saturday, but because of his the amount of work he's done in multiple divisions. He's been a light heavyweight champion, heavyweight champion, and he, outside of John Jones at light heavyweight and then the loss to Stipe, he's basically dominated both. I know he came back to heavyweight late in his career, but early on in his UFC tenure, he was dominating heavyweights. People forget that. But in light heavyweights, where he obviously did the bulk of his work, beating guys like Alexander Gustafsson, John Jones, is just on another level, and that's unfortunate for his case because I think if John Jones didn't exist, Daniel Cormier might be
Undefeated.
In our
Well,
top,
I mean, Stipe beat him, but
he might be in our top 4 or 3 guys.
Yeah,
ever,
yeah.
It's unfortunate that guy just seems to have that edge over him, but nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, he's really been. I mean, Anthony Rumble Johnson, he beat twice, finished him both times. That dude is terrifying.
yeah, I mean, survived an onslaught.
Yeah. So
Got knocked down.
Yeah.
Literally got knocked across the cage.
Yeah,
That's
I
how
mean-
powerful that man is.
and then obviously at heavyweight, he beats Stipe. Stipe, the longest reigning heavyweight champ.
And good wins in Strikeforce.
Yeah, in history.
Again, we don't want to go
Yeah.
too much into it, but he beat Josh Barnett, and
Yeah.
he's beaten. He had
He
another
beat
big
Dan
name.
Henderson.
Dan
as well.
Henderson.
I don't know if that was. I think that was in the UFC though. But yeah, I mean, then he beats Stipe.
He's beaten Frank Mir, Roy Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
Not that those are huge names, but Frank Mir's another pioneer, kind of the
Yeah.
heavyweight division.
Yeah, and then he defends that heavyweight title against Derek Lewis, another dangerous guy. We were just talking about him in our pilot episode. Ends up losing the belt back to Stipe, but a fight that he was winning up until he lost. But,
Right.
He's just got a very impressive resume. I don't see why he can't be on this list. For Stipe, though, again, I just said it. Longest reigning heavyweight champ, or the most title defenses, I should say.
Yep.
In my opinion, if he wins on Saturday, he's the heavyweight GOAT. If Cormier wins, he's the heavyweight GOAT.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
That's what it's for.
Yeah. So, with that being said, Stipe, with that, just having the most consecutive title defenses, the UFC heavyweight division, surprisingly, it's the first division the UFC established back with Mark Coleman as the inaugural champion back in, I believe, 1998.
I mean, we were walking around in the octagon with shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's surprising that it's been the longest division, yet the most title defenses the division had seen before Stipe was 2.
2 or 3. Because the record's 3, right?
Yeah, the record.
So it was 2 title defenses.
The record is 3. So yeah, 2 before that. And guys like Cain Velasquez, if he didn't have the injury problems he had, he probably would have been dominating for longer. but that's still a factor in play. Stipe's looked really good, man, especially on that title run he had. Being able to take the belt from Fabricio and the way he did.
Walking backwards.
In Brazil, mind you. Then goes
it was just a knockout spree that he went on.
Then he goes to Cleveland, as we talked about in the pilot episode. That was a show we were at. Gets dropped by Overeem, a dangerous striker, kickboxer. And Stipe comes back and finishes him decisively. Then he starches Junior Dos Santos, the guy who he had lost to early on in his career when JDS was at his peak. Then a killer in Francis Ngannou, who
dominated.
People were calling him MMA's Mike Tyson, which I'm not going to pretend like that still is not a potential.
Because he's looking more dangerous now than he ever has.
But Stipe had the most beautiful game plan against him.
It was perfect. He survived the first round, and then from there, buddy.
Yeah, it was no
dominated.
Contest.
Yeah, not even close.
And then obviously the disappointing knockout to Cormier, but comes back in that second fight and makes the most beautiful mid-fight adjustment I've ever seen.
Don't get me started.
Yeah,
it'll be talked about in the preview episode. But golly jeepers, I tell you, I have never seen a mid-fight adjustment like that ever.
I'm gonna have to get L's in the chat for golly
L's
jeepers.
in the comments.
So yeah, I'll let you go with your number 10 then, but that's fine.
Okay, so I will say, if Stipe wins Saturday, he takes my number 10. I already have DC on my list.
Okay.
But if Stipe wins, he takes my number 10. But as of right now, my number 10, even after, his most recent performances, I've got Max Blessed Holloway as number 10. The featherweight champion, he had 3 title defenses. He had the longest win streak in featherweight history, 14 in a row. That's unprecedented, man. That's a lot of wins in a row. Don't forget, by the way, that he TKO'd the featherweight GOAT twice. Twice. 2 times in a row.
Not once. Twice.
Not once. Twice. I've got Max Blessed Holloway, man. I know recently he has been on a little bit of a skid, but if you look at the losses he has, it's incredible. Like Conor McGregor.
That was back. I mean,
way back. Now,
I'm not saying if they rematch now that Conor could very well win that fight now.
Right.
But that was 2014.
That was his last loss before the win streak, if I'm not mistaken.
Before Poirier, I believe.
So yeah, Conor McGregor. He's lost to Dustin Poirier twice. I think as of recently, everybody knows how great of a fighter Dustin Poirier is.
And the first loss was when Max was 20 years old.
Yeah. You got to think, this kid, he's only 28 years old right now, and he's already got so many records and accolades, man. Like, he's not even 30.
I know, it's crazy.
He's got another decade. Like, potentially, barring any injuries.
Yeah.
He could bump up in 155. Granted, I think he has to redo his whole physique to do that. But again, Conor McGregor, 2 losses to Dustin Poirier, and 2 losses to Volkanovski.
Yeah.
He is losing to top tier competition. The second loss he had to Poirier was in an interim title fight for the 155-pound belt, and he won 2 of those rounds. It's not like he's getting slaughtered by these guys.
No.
And the loss he just had recently to Volkanovski, many argue, including us too, we mentioned it on the first episode, he won. He won 3-2. They just didn't give it to him. Max for me, I think he's number 10 because there's still so much potential. He is 28 years old with so many great achievements. I think he has a chance to win the title back. I think he has a chance to go to 155 if he changes his body and win a title there. He's young, man. That's my number 10. Max Blessed.
So I completely agree with you so much that I have him at my number 9.
Wow, look at this.
Yeah.
We literally, I'm giving away something, but we flip-flop. Okay. My number 9 is DC. Go ahead with your breakdown.
Yeah, so, pretty much everything you said there. Holloway, he had some growing pains in the beginning of his UFC tenure. Started at 20 years old.
20?
That's incredible. And
with minimal experience.
Lost to Poirier, a guy who was also young back then, but a guy who was much more established.
Yeah.
And,
he had came from another organization,
and then he loses to Conor, and
who was taking the world by storm.
Yeah, I mean that was not peak Conor, but that was Conor on his rise.
Oh yeah,
right around that time, and I mean after that, like you said, he doesn't lose again until the Poirier fight.
14 fights.
When you look at some of these wins, he's beating guys like Andre Fili, a guy who's hung around the top 10 for years. He's beat Cub Swanson, a guy I'm a big fan of, who always comes to fight.
Always game.
Charles Oliveira.
Beast. Most submissions in the UFC? Or is that?
Yeah, I believe so. And Charles Oliveira, a guy who is at lightweight.
And ranked.
And
top 10.
He's looking like a potential title challenge.
Yeah.
Then Jeremy Stevens, another legend.
I mean, do we need to even say more?
Ricardo Lamas, a great fight at the first card I ever watched.
Don't forget, that's the one.
Yeah.
Let's bang right now.
He pointed to the middle of the octagon, and they just start swinging. A fight that he was handedly winning.
And he said, fuck it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's do this. Let's bang.
Then, interim featherweight bout against Anthony Pettis, a dangerous guy.
Former champion.
Yeah, and he pretty much beats him pretty handedly. And then you have the back-to-back wins over what at the time we thought the featherweight GOAT, Jose Aldo.
That was the passing of the torch.
It was. And then the highlight reel performance of his career, in my opinion, is Brian Ortega.
Unbelievable.
And I still believe in Brian Ortega, but at that time, I thought Ortega was going to win that fight. I really did.
Yeah, I remember being very nervous. I'm a huge Max fan, and I was nervous, man. Ortega was undefeated.
Yeah.
Beaten everybody, 6 in a row in the UFC, I think. Submissions, got decent striking. He's dangerous. Still dangerous.
And I can tell you that win is what convinced me that he's like in that
GOAT
top
status.
of the top.
Yeah.
The Jose wins, don't get me wrong, super impressive. The 14 fight win streak.
Yeah.
Obviously impressive. But that fight is what sold it to me that this guy is on another level. He is at the cream of the crop, excuse me. And then after that, you have the loss to Poirier, and he decisively lost that fight, I'll say. Like, I thought it was like clear-cut decision for Poirier. But do not get me wrong.
But won 2 rounds. I think it was a clear-cut 3-2.
You
think 4-1?
I think I had 4-1.
Okay.
But again, it's just like the first Volkanovski fight, which was also a 4-1 for Volk.
Yeah.
But yet, it never felt like Holloway was out of the fight.
Yeah.
Like, you felt like he
hurt Dustin. Yeah. Like, that was incredible fight.
And you could tell, like, for as big as Holloway looks at 145, he looked a lot smaller.
Yeah, Dustin looked much bigger.
And he was still hanging in there, man. And Poirier was hitting him with some shots.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if he can transform his physique somehow, I know obviously he's not going to get taller, but like, if he can, I don't know, he's a little skinny, maybe just a little more muscle. I think he's tall enough to compete. I think it's just a matter of strength. Mm-hmm. He can compete at 155.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of where his career goes. 155 is such a dangerous division now.
And he would jump right in with the top 5. That'd be his first fight.
I'd like to see him stick around at 145, especially for now, and I don't see him moving anytime soon.
Again, 28 years old, people.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
He's got a long career ahead of him.
Lots of fighters don't even hit their prime till they're 30 plus.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then, I mean, even between the losses that we just talked about, he had a win over Frankie Edgar, another legend of the sport.
Yeah, kind of a big deal.
Sure, Frankie Edgar is kind of on the downswing of his career.
But he's fought in the who's who.
But he has fought in everybody.
In 3 divisions.
And Holloway just handled him for 5 rounds.
Yep.
So that's pretty much my case for putting him at number 9. I know you right now we're agreeing with each other a lot.
Yeah. We're basically flip-flopping.
Did you want to get into Cormier at all?
I mean, really, you hit the nail on the head. Mm-hmm. I've got DC at number 9. He's a 2-time champ at 205. He's a heavyweight champ. I think a big thing for me, he's defended both belts. Mm-hmm. Some of these double champs, Conor never defended either belt. Mm-hmm. Henry won the bantamweight and then defended, so he defended twice. He's the only other double champ to defend both.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he was stripped of the flyweight title.
Oh, I guess he technically
I don't think he held both when he won the bantamweight belt.
Yeah, he
Which is
defended the
which is-
bantamweight after he got stripped.
Which is the distinction there, because
True.
Cormier dropped his belt pretty
So
much.
then DC is the only one besides Amanda Nunes,
Yes.
which I will get into later. Yeah, man. And one thing that wasn't mentioned, again, it's not completely related to the UFC, but this man was an Olympic wrestler. And he just has accolades for days. And you look at it, he's got 2 losses in his career because one's a no contest to John. So he's lost to John Jones, and he's lost to Stipe Miocic. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. I mean, what else do I even need to say?
Yeah.
What I didn't say, you covered, and I think that solely solidifies him as a top 10 of all time.
Agreed. So who's your number 8?
My number 8, kind of just mentioned her. The Lioness,
Really?
Amanda Nunes, my 8th pound-for-pound best fighter of all time.
See, I'm a little upset.
You think she should be...
I think she should be a lot higher.
Okay. I agree.
Oh,
I
you
see,
agree?
No, I see what you're
No,
saying.
no. Apparently, you don't agree because
I
you
see
put
what
her
you're
number
saying.
8.
Listen. We're talking about another person that's still fighting. Granted, that's part of my thing here. She's wiped out 2 divisions. There's no one left. There's no one left for her to beat. She is a 2-division champion, defended the belt at 135 and 145. I think at the time I initially made this, she had 4 title defenses. That was before her last one. I think she's at 5 total title defenses now. She has wiped out every body in both divisions. She has beaten every women's champion in both divisions. Handily. Finished Miesha Tate. First round, if I'm not mistaken. Battered her. Ronda Rousey. Whew. We don't even need to go into that one.
That was incredible.
That was just unbelievable. Hello. Chris Cyborg. Undefeated for 10 years. Go night-night in the first round. Listen. Amanda Nunes. GOAT. Greatest women fighter ever. It's not even close. It's not close. She knocked out Holly Holm with a head kick. By the way, if anybody's listening, Holly Holm knocked out Ronda with a head kick. So it's not supposed to work that way.
Yeah.
Amanda said, hold my beer. She knocked out Holly Holm with a head kick, man.
Yes.
And then she's beaten Jermaine Durand, that was her last title defense. She showed off how skilled she is on the ground.
Yeah.
People sleep on that because of how good she is striking. She's unbelievable, man. She's 20-4 now, I believe. 19-4, 20-4. There's no one stopping her in either division. She could retire now if she wanted to. She's going to be a mom next month, I think, is when the baby's due. So, I know Dana wants her to stick around, but my God, she has nothing left to prove. But as a fan, I want her to keep fighting.
I do want to give a correction real quick. She is 20-4, so you got that
20-4.
But her last title defense actually was against Felicia Spencer.
Yeah, 145. So she was. It was
250.
No, like at 145 pounds.
Yeah.
Come on, Noah. That 145. That was years ago. Yeah. So she defended against Jermaine, and then Felicia at 145, in another dominant performance.
Yeah.
Shout out Felicia Spencer, by the way, tough as nails.
Yeah, those fights, her going up against Cyborg and then Nunes back to back, those are.
Tough. Nunes, man, arguably could be much higher, but again, someone that's still in their prime and I think could fight more, could easily move up. But right now, I've got her number 8.
Okay, once you explained it, fully support having her in the top 10, obviously.
Yeah.
And I probably pretty much spoiled that I will have her higher.
Right.
But I think what I'm going to be curious is who you have over her when we get into that later.
I think you'll be surprised by
I'm not mad that she's on the list. And the way you talked about her, that's pretty much all I'm going to be able to say. What else can...
she leaves you
She is
speechless.
the female GOAT.
It's not close.
Yeah. So my number 8.
Let's hear it.
I struggled with this one a bit. I'm not gonna lie.
These middle ones, man, I'm telling you, like 5 to 8.
It was weird because putting people like Cormier and Holloway at 9 and 10 was almost like easy. Putting guys that I had above number 8 was somewhat easy. But yet, like around this range, like the 7 to 8 range, is where I really was struggling.
It's tough.
And that's weird because. If I'm so for sure that the 2 guys behind him should be on there, why am I putting this guy in front of him? And that was kind of what I had to convince myself of. Like, okay, why am I putting him here? And that is the current lightweight champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
All right.
So
he is also on my list.
let me tell you why I struggled with this one.
Let's hear it.
And it's going to come down to...
This is number 8, correct?
Yes.
Number 8.
It's going to come down to the level of competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So, not saying he has not fought good fighters. I mean, a lot of newer viewers of the UFC will not know, but I mean, Gleison Tebow back in 2012 was a good guy. Abel Trujillo, that's a guy that Tony Ferguson had also had a lot of trouble with. Pat Healy, another guy that was coming up strong before he had to, I believe, retire. Then he beats RDA.
Kind of a big deal.
Back in 2014.
A loss that I think, if I interrupt, it's a win, I should say, for Khabib that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, especially because I'm pretty sure that...
RDA became the champ.
RDA became the champ after that because Khabib's had... People
think
don't
about
realize
that.
it now, but Khabib used to have a lot of injury problems back.
Yeah.
He probably would have been champion a lot sooner
Yeah.
if it had not been for
And
Tate.
weight
He
cutting
took nearly
and-
2 years off.
Yeah.
Contemplated retirement, mind you. So,
Yeah, man, that's crazy to think about that.
then you get up to where he beat Michael Johnson at 205, and he had that infamous post-fight speech talking about...
I want your chicken.
Yeah, he's like, Russia, 150 million,
Yeah.
Irish, only 5 million.
And that's when I became terrified of Khabib.
Yeah.
That's when I knew this guy
Yeah.
can beat anybody.
And then probably, in my opinion, his best performance, the fight against Edson Barboza.
Oof. Oh.
Poor Barboza, you know.
Can we just pour one out?
Barboza, great striker, and Khabib, you know, a dominant wrestler. This was a
Ragdoll.
big test for him.
Ragdoll.
Going from Michael Johnson and even RDA.
And I will say, he looked a little vulnerable at times against Michael. Briefly on the feet, but of course once on the ground,
I
not
agree.
even close. But Michael, I think, wobbled him just a tiny bit. Just one of those wild haymakers that
Yeah.
Johnson throws.
And,
But yeah, granted, a big step up.
And then with Barboza, though, he just completely shut him down.
It was brutal.
I remember going into that fight, I don't remember if I picked Barboza, but I remember thinking, like, if Khabib is going to lose anytime soon, this is the guy that's going to beat him.
Yeah.
And he basically just made him look... He literally made him look like
A league of his own.
He made him look like CM Punk, basically.
Yeah,
like,
it was bad.
Like, it was rough. And I felt, you know, you almost feel bad watching it.
That was the worst I've ever felt for a fighter watching a fight. I wanted it to be over.
So I guess after that's kind of where me trying to figure out his placement comes in. Because sure, those are some solid wins on there, and you know the Edson Barboza win is nothing to scoff at. But winning the title against Ally Aquina, you know, obviously a guy that is not actually a title challenger, especially at the time. But
2 days notice.
yeah,
Or
I mean
whatever.
and then
What was a crazy week, man? Like,
Yeah,
it's supposed to fight Tony, then it was supposed to be Max, and then Al, and Khabib was just
and then
game.
you also have McGregor doing it with the bus.
Yeah, man.
It was just a
Craziest
it was a
week in
weird
UFC.
week. So he kind of wins the championship under a cloud of like, just a lot
Controversy.
of controversy. Like him winning the belt wasn't even the biggest story to come out of that.
Yeah.
And then his first defense against Conor McGregor, which, mind you, for all the grief he gets, and you know, we've in our conversations we've surely given him our fair share of shit. You know, a guy who I could see someone making an argument for him to be in the top.
Connor?
10. Yeah.
100%.
You know, just for what he's done for the sport, because that is a factor.
Yeah. And he's still, you know, he's had, you know, the losses in his career have been against top-notch competition.
Yeah. So that win was very impressive, and
I mean, he dominated.
Yeah, and I know Connor has now kind of said like that he was, I forget what all he said. He basically said that he was unmotivated, like drinking through his camp and all that stuff.
It got very personal and uncomfortable.
But even after, I'm talking about like the lead up was very bad. But even after the fight, now when Connor's trying to get that rematch, he kept saying he was like hungover during the fight, like all this stuff. I don't know how much I buy it. I mean, I can definitely see maybe him not being super motivated for it, but I don't understand why.
We know Khabib was motivated.
And then you have the Dustin Poirier win, another very impressive showing.
And I really like Dustin Poirier just doesn't get enough credit for how good
And
he
what's
is.
funny is Dustin nearly won that fight.
Yeah,
If he pulled
had him
guard,
going backwards.
if he had pulled guard on that guillotine, right?
He was in. It was in.
Yeah.
Deep.
But besides that moment,
Dominant performance.
It was a dominant performance. And I guess with my placement, like he's got a big fight coming up with Gaethje. And then after that, if he goes and fights GSP or fights Conor again or whatever he does, if he fights Tony, which is what we all want to see, but ultimately, like, I feel like he can only, like, his placement to me is the one I'm most unsure of.
Mm-hmm.
If he loses to Gaethje and then goes on to lose to, like, GSP, that's enough to make him go out of my top 10.
If he beats both, it's enough
If
to
he beats
boost
both, it's
him
enough
real high.
to boost him nearly to the very top.
Yeah.
So he's the one I'm the most unsure of. But also, I guess, outside of who he's fought, I've never seen someone wrestle the guy this way that he wrestles. Like, he is incredible to watch when he gets people on the ground. He is literally like a bear. He gets a hold of you and he will not let go.
It's crazy.
And I'm people will sit there. A lot of people give grief to wrestlers. I talked about this in our pilot, and I understand why it's not the most aesthetically pleasing to watch. It can get a little boring to watch, but it is a style of fighting.
And he does it on a whole different level.
Yeah, and the ground and pound that he puts on people, like, you just watch that Conor fight, and for all the respect to Conor, not trying to talk down on him.
No,
he looked
brutal.
defeated.
Yeah, man. That's what he does to people. That's what Khabib does to people.
Even Dustin, at the end of their fight, defeated.
Dustin's like, I couldn't get him off of me.
Yeah.
I couldn't move.
Yeah.
It's like getting suffocated.
So that's pretty much all I'm going to say about Khabib. I know you just said that you will get into him later. But
next is number 7, right?
Yeah, so I guess I'll do my number 7, and
let me segue and do my 7.
Okay, go ahead.
My number 7 is Khabib.
Oh, it is.
My number 7 is Khabib.
Nice.
Again, there's nothing more to say. He's one thing that we didn't say. He is, in my opinion, and many others, the most dominant champion / fighter we've probably ever seen. Mm-hmm. He has lost. Listen at this. I'm gonna. Everybody listen. On official scorecards, Khabib has lost 1 round in the UFC. Think about it. 1 round.
It's incredible.
It's crazy, man. Noah touched on everything else. He's 28 now. Never lost. Never been close to losing. I haven't seen all of his fights, obviously, before the UFC, but I've seen a damn video of him wrestling a bear as a kid, and that's enough for me to have anyone on my top 10. But yeah, man, Khabib's my number 7. Again, not a ton to say because Noah covered most of it, but he's the most dominant champion fighter in UFC history. He's unbelievable. That's my number 7. I figured it'd be better to segue it that way.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good. So for my number 7, I'm curious what you're gonna think about this one.
All right.
My number 7 is...
You're really struggling to say this.
The Iceman, Chuck Liddell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So...
I love me some Iceman.
So, with Chuck Liddell, he was what the UFC needed at that time.
Yes.
It's kind of like... My argument for Chuck is almost what I could see someone's argument for Conor being.
Yeah.
Like the star power, the amount of fans they brought, things like that.
What the company needed at that specific time.
But with Chuck, like during that time, this is around the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 time, the UFC on the brink of going out of business.
Yeah, man, UFC is still really struggling in the early 2000s.
His rivalry with Tito Ortiz was literally the thing keeping it afloat.
It's the greatest rivalry, in my opinion, in UFC history.
Mm-hmm.
That could probably be another video.
Yeah.
Or another podcast, rather.
Yeah.
Down the road. But to me, that's...
And him getting the better of both meetings with Tito Ortiz definitely puts him above Tito. But, he was light heavyweight champion, defended the belt, I believe, it was 4 times.
That's probably up there in total.
So, mind you, he lost to Randy Couture. Right?
Another legend. People.
Then UFC makes a deal with Pride. So, he goes over to Pride and he beats Overeem in Pride, which
kind
is
of a big deal at that time.
In 2003.
Yeah, we're talking.
And then he ends up losing to Rampage in Pride. Comes back, beats Tito, Vernon White in a first-round knockout. I know a lot of people don't know Vernon White, but first-round knockout. Then he beats Randy Couture for the light heavyweight championship, avenges that loss. Then defends it against Jeremy Horn, a guy who beat him
He was a beast.
early on in his career. A guy who has over, I believe, 100 professional fights.
Yeah, it's something crazy.
Then he defends it again against Randy Couture, caps off that trilogy. Then he defends against Babalu Sabral, a guy that a lot of people nowadays won't remember, but he was at one time up there. You know,
That's what it's all about. Like at the time, who was dominant, and
then
he fought every one of them.
His probably crowning achievement, beating Tito that second time, at the time I believe was the biggest pay-per-view.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
UFC 66 back in 2006.
Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if you haven't seen the 30 for 30 about Tito and Chuck's rivalry, I mean, if that doesn't say enough about it, there's a 30 for 30 on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great.
It's incredible.
It put the UFC on the map.
Unfortunately, you know, I do need to include like kind of the later years of his
Downfall.
career. Yeah, so he ends up losing the belt to Rampage Jackson. After that, loses to the Dean of Mean.
Also, let us know in the comments, is that the greatest nickname in UFC history?
The Dean of Mean, Keith Jardine.
Let that flow. The Dean of Mean, Keith Jardine.
He shouldn't have lost to Keith Jardine. I'm just gonna be frank. Great nickname, but
not a great fighter.
That guy gets hit with a pillow and he's out. So loses in a split decision to Keith Jardine. Not a great performance for him, but comes back and beats Vanderlei Silva in probably one of the top 10 best UFC fights of all time.
In a fight that was long overdue, and people had wanted that fight for years.
It was a fight of the year for 2007.
Yeah, there probably wasn't even a close second.
No.
That fight's crazy.
And then after that, you have 4 straight losses by knockout. Rashad Evans, Shogun Rua, Rich Franklin. Oh, well, then you had the loss to Tito Ortiz.
Well, and again, that doesn't...
we're
not...
So I got a little ahead there.
But listen, at the killer's row of fighters that he's
you're talking about Rashad Evans, who ends up winning the light heavyweight title. You're talking about Shogun Rua, who also goes on to win the light heavyweight title. And Rich Franklin, who, shout out, another Ohio guy,
was at one point the best fighter in the world.
Was the best middleweight and best fighter in the world.
He was unbelievable.
He was, you know what's funny is Rich Franklin, to me, his career reminds me of Daniel Cormier a little bit. He would be the guy that I feel like we would have in our top 10 if not for Anderson Silva.
Yeah. Daniel
Cormier could be the GOAT if not for John Jones.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about Rich Franklin.
That's a good comparison.
But, that's really all I can really say about Chuck. There's just, for the time, he was the guy. And he always put, and a lot of it's the performances he was putting on. I mean, yeah, sure, his chin didn't hold up later on, but that dude had a crazy chin. He went in there and banged it out with these guys.
It can only last so long.
And, like, literally just was so impressive while doing it. I just had to give respect to him due to, like, just, you know, it's the Iceman, you know?
Yeah, man.
So that's
the trunks alone.
So that's my number 7.
I like I respect it.
So should I go ahead with my number 6 too then?
Go right ahead.
Back to you.
Sure.
So my number 6, some people might think this is a little low. And it's gonna be the former flyweight champion, Demetrius Johnson.
Oh wow.
Demetrius Johnson.
That's an interesting.
That's my number 6. And I can sit here all day and talk about why Demetrius Johnson is one of the best ever. I mean, he came in, he was the inaugural men's flyweight champion and held the belt for literally, he literally held the belt for
years.
7 years.
He set the record for title defense.
So, yeah, beat Anderson Silva's record.
And kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and he looked impressive while doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess why I put him lower than what maybe a lot of people would put is while there's no doubt that his athletic ability and his ability as a mixed martial artist might be the very best we've ever seen, just seeing some of the stuff he was able to do. Unfortunately for him, his level of competition was not. His level of competition was not up to the caliber. It's
Yeah.
kind of the argument I made with Khabib
Yeah.
earlier, where he's yet to really fight those like big fights, but Khabib's even done it more so than
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
Demetrius has. So when you look at some of his wins, Ian McCall having that draw, that was like, there was a lot of controversy with that one, because it was essentially when they introduced the flyweight belt, it was a 4-man tournament, and in the first round it was Ian McCall versus Demetrius Johnson, and the rules were it was 3-round fights because the other side was Joseph Benavidez versus someone, I can't think of the name right now, but essentially 3-round fight. If the fight was a draw, I believe if the fight was a draw, then they would do an extra 4th round.
Yeah.
Well, the fight ends, the judges' scorecards come in, and they get miscounted.
Oh no.
So it's read off as
You're telling me something completely new to me.
So it's read off as a decision for Mighty Mouse, when it was supposed to be a draw, and therefore there should have been a 4th round.
Right.
Mind you, that 4th round, Ian McCall was surging in that 3rd round, and possibly could have won that fight. A guy that people forget about because of his injury problems and the fact that he's fighting in flyweight division, but he at one time was like, he was a star like in the making.
And a badass mustache.
Yes, that too. So they end up rematching basically to settle who will go to the finals of that tournament. He ends up winning more decisively against Ian McCall, and from there he beats Benavidez. And then like John Dodson, he's beat, I believe, twice. He beat Benavidez 3 times total.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have guys like, not to take anything away from these guys, but like John Moraga, Ali Bogatinov,
Tim Elliott.
Chris Carriasso, Tim Elliott, who gave him a great show.
Yeah, it was a great fight.
Wilson Hayes, Ray Borg, the guy we talked about who just got released, and then that all leads to him losing the belt to Henry Cejudo in a razor-thin close decision. A fight that I actually think we disagreed on. I actually scored it for Henry, and I believe you had it
I had DJ.
Mm-hmm. And it's understandable.
Again, not a robbery though.
No, I thought the fight was so close.
Great fight.
So really spoke to how, because he had beat Cejudo before.
Dominantly.
First round
Finish.
TKO.
With a body to the, or knee to the body.
Yeah. So it showed the growth of Cejudo, but also showed that how damn good Mighty Mouse still was. Because look at what Cejudo went on to do.
The king of cringe.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
hello.
Then that's kind of where his UFC tenure ends. He ends on that loss. There should have been a trilogy fight, in my opinion. But instead, he gets traded to ONE FC for Ben Askren. A guy
we
who
know how that played
will
out.
not be in our top 10.
He will not be in our top 10.
But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I can say about him. I feel like what only holds him back is the level of competition. But he was so damn impressive.
Yeah.
And I can't take anything away from him for that reason. So that's the reason he's number 6, and I'm curious who your number.
Well, I think
6.
for my number 6, a lot of people are going to think this person shouldn't be on here.
Oh.
But I'm going to say it.
Okay.
Dominic Cruz. You had a big sigh there from across the way.
I'm not, like, I'll hear you out.
Okay.
I definitely, just real quick, I definitely am surprised.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a little shocked, and
Yeah.
I'm curious what your argument is.
Now, I will say this list I have on here was technically made before he just lost to the King of Cringe himself.
Yeah.
But I still think that doesn't take away anything from him because, again, Henry Cejudo could be on lists of the top 10, no doubt. So he's the 2-time 135-pound champion. He's only defended the belt twice in the UFC, which is kind of crazy to think. But he's still, I think, widely known or accepted as the best or top 2 or 3 bantamweights of all time. You got to think he dominated in the WEC before being bought out, or however that whole thing went down, before coming to the UFC. You got to look at the people that have beat Dominic. You know, Cody Garbrandt in the best performance of his life. Henry just beat him recently. I mean, really, besides that, his losses. I mean, he has a trilogy with Uriah Faber, 3-0 I think,
no, he
or
lost,
2-1.
He lost the first one.
Lost the first one. So I mean, Uriah's a legend of the sport. I'm blanking right now, but he was just, I think, an incredible fighter. And I think the biggest thing and why people would leave him off of lists, he's been relatively inactive, right? And again, that's stuff that's out of his control. He has been probably the most injury-prone champion of all time. Like, imagine had he not, tore both ACLs and all these injuries, how many more times he could have fought and dominated. And I think his style is so unique and something you don't see much in the UFC. Nowadays, you probably see it a little more because it's a new breed of fighters.
Especially like his stance. And
man, like just so awkward and hard to deal with. And I think that's why he was so successful for so long. I mean, he dominated in the UFC and the WBC, and I know that's a surprising one at number 6, but I genuinely feel, and I know it's a lot of what ifs, but had he not been injured so many years, I just have to imagine he continues dominating in the UFC.
Yeah, so no doubt he is probably the best bantamweight ever, as of now.
Yeah,
for sure. And however, I guess my only thing that I'm going to disagree with is ultimately I do think those injuries play into where he ranks at because, for example, I talked about Cain Velasquez earlier.
Right.
A guy who looked super dominant, but yet his injuries, and then obviously he had the 2 fights he had where it was at altitude and his cardio just wasn't able to hold up. Point being, I can't put Dominic Cruz in my top 10 because to me his career is not like, it's just there's not enough consistency there. Now I will say, having those very serious ACL tears, having the I forget what it's called, but when he got the surgery and it rejected like the fake ACL or whatever, however that works. So having to get another surgery, and then tears his other ACL.
It's awful, man.
And he still kept coming back.
I mean, years off of his career.
I mean, when he came back and beat TJ Dillashaw for the belt, that was like one of the most feel good moments.
Yeah.
Nothing against TJ, but for him to come back and just look as good as he did, nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
And then I guess some other reasons I guess I don't put him on the list is, think of when he was injured, who was on top of that division. It was Renan Barão.
Yeah.
A guy who was undefeated for like 30 fights. The guy that TJ came out of nowhere and dominated.
Shocked the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a guy, Renan Barão, if you go watch his performances against like Eddie Wineland, Uriah Faber, like that guy was a killer.
So we have a fun matchup here, what could have been.
Yeah.
What if Dominic Cruz could have defended the belt
I would have
against...
loved to have seen him fight a guy like that and seen who really was like better,
Yeah.
And then the loss to Cody Garbrandt, who Cody had
masterful performance. That's one of the best all-around, 5-round performances I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. And then the loss to Henry recently, which there's been, I guess there's some controversy to that.
Even though, I mean, look, he's on my list and not yours, but that was a good decision, a good stoppage.
So I guess those are the only reasons why I wasn't able to quite get him on my top 10. I mean, he would definitely, if it was like a top 20, then I'm probably putting him on there. But I somewhat respect your decision.
I'll take that. I'll take it somewhat.
I can't say I love it though, especially when you put Amanda Nunes at number 8 and you put Dominic Cruz at number 6.
Both still fighting. They both can continue their legacies.
Anyway,
you're just bashing me in front of our wonderful viewers. Is all you're doing. Our listeners, I guess.
I want some L's in the chat.
That's all you're calling for is L's.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna give me a dub.
So.
Do you want me to go into 5?
Okay. Well. Yeah.
Because I might just say one more controversial one.
Okay.
Jose Aldo.
Wow.
He's my number 5.
Jose Aldo.
And it's weird. People are probably thinking, now wait a minute. You had Max Holloway as 10, and he beat Jose twice. I get it. But you got to look at the body of work Jose Aldo did for. I'm pretty sure he went unbeaten for a decade between two organizations. In the UFC alone, he is a 2-time champion because he won it back UFC 200 against Frankie.
Well,
was that interim? Technically,
I think that fight was supposed to be a #1 contender for Conor, but then Conor ended up getting stripped, so it
became undisputed.
So okay, Holloway had the fight with Pettis for the interim belt.
Yeah.
So then when Holloway was set to fight the undisputed champion, Conor wasn't fighting. So basically the belt went back to Jose. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So Jose kind of got it back not because he won it back, but because by default.
Right.
But
and
yes,
then
2-time champion.
Yeah, a 2-time champ at featherweight. 7 straight title defenses in the UFC alone. So I mentioned this earlier. He's arguably the greatest featherweight of all time. Now, I personally don't think he is anymore because of Max. Again, both these guys are still fighting, so they can easily move up or down my list. But I have Jose on here because he was kind of a pioneer for that type of weight class. Because you got to think these smaller weight classes were newer, took longer to become established, and he dominated for so long against top-tier competition in 2 organizations. And now we see him competing at a lower weight class. He's had 2 fights there. Arguably beat Marlon Moraes, but again, not officially. So Marlon beat him. A killer in that division, by the way. And then he just recently lost to Peter Yan. That was a great fight until the latter rounds when Yan really started to pull away.
Yeah, it seemed like around end of round 3 to round 4 is when Yan really took over. But leading up to then, Aldo looked like he belonged.
Yeah, and another thing, so Jose and Max on my list kind of relate because, Jose's been around for years, over a decade, and he's still, is he 31, 32?
You talking about Jose?
Yeah,
he
is still so young, and as I mentioned earlier, these fighters don't even hit their prime till they're 30 most of the time. Now, Jose may have already been in the prime. I'm not saying he still has prime to happen, but the fact that he's still so young with potential in a new weight class, I think still, leaves some leeway for some good victories, and you just can't look past the level of competition that he's fought and the people that he's lost to.
Yeah, I truly don't think he's done. Especially he made the move to bantamweight, and on paper you see he's 0-2 at bantamweight. So you go, oh well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
But you have to think he lost that split decision to Marlon Moraes.
#1 contender.
A fight that I thought he won.
Yeah, I did too.
And Dana thought he won so much.
He gave him a title shot, people. An interim title shot.
Even though
undisputed title shot.
Yeah, technically he lost that fight, but everybody else but the 2 judges that scored it for Moraes thought he won.
Yeah.
And it was a close fight though, but it's still Marlon Moraes was the guy who was the #1 contender at that time.
And a beast.
And then Peter Yan,
a good fight to begin, but he did pull away.
But I do think Aldo's not done in that division. I do think he has time to get. Just to be clear, he's not on my top 10, but I do think he has time to make his way on there.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to see.
You didn't mention the Conor McGregor loss, 13-second knockout.
Well, it's a terrible loss to have, and it's again it's not getting knocked out in 13 seconds is a bad loss. But when you look at the actual person you lose to, it's Conor McGregor.
It was Conor at his absolute
peak, and he's lost to Max twice. Again, he's on both of our lists.
Right.
So these losses he has, I think he has 7 total after the Yan fight.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the people that he's fighting, and it's just even against Max in both fights, he had his moments. Max is just so damn tough, and I definitely see the argument why you don't think he should be on here or that high.
I will say though, I'm looking at his title defenses right now. He had in the UFC, Mark Hominick, a guy who was big at the time.
7 title defenses.
Kenny Florian,
Ken Flo,
Chad Mendez twice,
Chad Money,
Frankie Edgar,
legend,
Korean Zombie,
literal zombie,
Ricardo Lamas.
Hello.
And then he ends up after the Conor loss beating Frankie again.
Yeah.
Handedly. So I for sure, and then obviously after the back-to-back Max losses, Super impressive performance against Jeremy Stevens.
Yeah, all the body work was.
And Jeremy Stevens was, looking like he was maybe if he would have won that fight,
he was peaking. Yeah,
and I actually thought Jeremy was going to win that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up beating Renato Moicano.
That's a great win. Another one that I don't think gets credit. Moicano was a beast at the time.
Well, he still is.
He was ranked third, I think, when that fight happened.
I mean, a guy who really is still hanging around, but he doesn't have that name value that some of those guys I mentioned before have.
So I guess it's just like more so look at the people that he's fought, the dominance that he had. It's hard to dominate for 10 straight years. Like on our list combined, there's only a handful that can dominate for a decade.
It's crazy because now that I'm looking at it, like I'm almost like, man, maybe I should have put him on here, but I think in my head, once I put Max at 9, I wasn't gonna put him above Max.
That makes sense.
Because I looked at it like Max is the best featherweight.
I guess my thought process there is that Max is still a couple years younger, and I think the ceiling for Max at each point of their careers right now, it's higher for Max. Mm-hmm. Max can still do so much more. I think he can easily become the featherweight champion again. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think with a physique change, he can challenge at the 155 level for the title. So that's kind of, I guess, how their current careers are at this point, ceiling-wise. But Jose, as a whole, has had just more dominance so far. But Max can easily overtake him. Max, by no means, is done, and I think he easily cracks into the top 5 if he continues to, or if he regains, if he creates that new game plan and dominates like he once did.
Cool. So my number 5.
Oh, you're looking at me weird.
My number 5, and I think when me and you have talked about this in the past, even though we've never shared our list, we've talked about like who we think is like the best of all time and stuff like that. I've always mentioned this guy, and that is Randy Couture.
I had a feeling that's who it was going to be.
So
this is a good one, people. Listen, hear him out here.
So Randy Couture, right? If you just look at his record, he's 19-11 in his career. That's just. I'm not saying that's not just. Actually, it's pretty much strictly. I mean, his very first professional fight was UFC 13. Then he goes to Vale Tudo, Japan. Then he goes to Rings. Also great organizations for a couple fights, but almost his entire career is in the UFC. And this is definitely a pick that's based on kind of the accolades. Mm-hmm. 2-time light heavyweight champion and 2-time heavyweight champion. And to go off that, what a lot of these guys on this list, the trend is they hit that point where they lose something, like whether it's they get too old or injuries catch up or the competition catches up, and you see that skid. There's like 3 or 4 fight skid or so, 4 out of 5 fight skid, and it almost like taints their record a little bit and like makes them look less appealing on a list like this. Anderson Silva's going through something like that right now. But with Randy Couture, at the age he won that second heavyweight belt, people forget Tim Sylvia, even though he was back then the heavyweight division was not was probably at its weakest, at its lowest point. Sylvia's this 6'8", right at the edge of the heavyweight limit, 265 pounds, like just a monster of a man. Mm-hmm. And Randy Couture comes in at the age of, I want to say he was, he's 57 now, and when he won that fight, it was 2007, so he was 44 years old. It's
crazy. His whole career, he was always older than everybody.
Yeah. So at 44 years old, he comes in and dominates.
A ginormous 6'8", freaking humongous person.
And then defends it against Gabriel Gonzaga.
At the time, this man.
Another
killer.
Just animal, just beast of a man who had knocked out Crow Cop with a leg kick.
Crow Cop.
Yeah.
Look it up.
Yeah. So then obviously he has the loss to Brock Lesnar and stuff, and then after losing the belt, he loses to Big Nog.
Great.
In a, I believe, yeah, it was fight of the year.
That's another pioneer type
Fight of the year
fighter
for 2009
for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And then after that, like people, he had those back-to-back losses, but then he comes back and beats Brandon Vera, the guy who's over.
He was very good at the time.
ONE FC heavyweight champion now.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he beats Mark Coleman, which is kind of funny that Coleman
was still fighting.
Yeah. And then he beats James Toney, the boxer, which is
Hey, you got it.
It's kind of like a CM
fighting who's
but,
put in front of him.
Yeah. So not saying those are Brandon Vera is an impressive win, especially at that time. But Mark Coleman, James Toney, yeah, whatever. And then he gets the KO'd by Lyoto Machida in his final fight. Crane kick, just
crane kick right to the face.
Crazy.
But that's at the peak.
So
like
this
Lyoto
is
was that
this is
guy.
when he's 45, 46 years old.
Yeah, man. It's
But
crazy.
if you go back even earlier in his career, so obviously I mentioned he started at UFC 13. Well, at UFC 15, guess what? He beats Vitor Belfort. Then he goes on to defeat Maurice Smith. He becomes the third ever UFC heavyweight champion. And that is where he leaves the UFC. So the belt basically gets taken
Vacated,
off. He
yeah.
doesn't get beat for it. He just
Excuse me.
vacates it basically to go fight over in Japan. And then he comes back, beats Kevin Randleman to win the heavyweight championship back. And then he ends up leaving again.
He was all over.
So actually, he was a 3-time heavyweight champion.
It's crazy.
And then he comes back again, beats Pedro Hizzo, another guy that was just... And mind you, he comes back, beats Pedro Hizzo for the heavyweight championship. Like, this is... and then beats him again. And then that's where he comes to some losses. Like, he lost to Josh Barnett for the belt. Loses to Rico Rodriguez, another guy that was big at the time. And then he beats Chuck and Tito back to back. That was probably the most impressive run he had, just those two fights.
And it's at the prime of all of their careers.
Everybody wanted to see Chuck versus Tito. Chuck and Tito were looked at as the two best that the UFC had to offer.
Randy said,
Randy came in.
I'll take care of him.
Light heavyweight debut. Basically runs through Chuck Liddell. And then that gave him the interim light heavyweight championship. Goes the next, basically just a couple months later, fights Tito for the
And
undisputed
makes him
belt
look stupid.
and just dominates him.
He slapped him on the ass.
Tito, a powerful wrestler, got out wrestled by Randy Couture. And this is a guy in his late 30s at the time, early 40s.
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. And they were, Chuck and Tito were both in the prime of their career.
And I just take all of that into account when I'm making that list. Obviously, the competition at that time, like those were guys, like those names I listed off. They may not be names that you think of much today, like Pedro Hizzo, Rico Rodriguez.
But it's all about the time.
Yeah,
Again,
it's the
and at the
time
time, these
period.
people were legit.
Yeah, and the fact that he basically came into the UFC with just the Roman Greco wrestling background and was able to make a career that went into his mid-40s. He was able to learn the sport, really adapt along with, as the sport was adapting to become mixed martial artists instead of guys that specialized in one specific style of fighting, whether it was boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. He adapted along with the sport. So I have to put him this high on that list for that reason, along with the accolades and the fact that he was able to keep doing it until the very end.
Yeah.
So that's why he's my number.
I like it. It's different, but it makes sense,
So,
And I think him bouncing back and forth doesn't get the credit it deserves.
yeah.
Like that it would now. People always talk about, 2-division, blah, blah, blah now. But back then, it was just like, whatever.
when he was fighting a heavyweight, he was fighting around 220 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, he was so much smaller than everybody else.
that's a 40-pound weight difference a lot of times.
It's wild.
So I love Randy Couture. I'm not biased for him. It's not like he's one of my all-time faves, but I just have so much respect for a guy that was able to do it that late, and when most people are retiring or can't even compete at the level that they used to. He was able to do it and do it at the very best. So I guess I'll move into my number 4.
Number 4. We're almost there.
So
we're getting close.
So I wrote this, and then I'm sitting here, and as I was talking, I was like, man, I might switch these two. But
I did make a switch on mine last second, so that's okay. I won't judge you.
I think my number 4.
I think I know who it is.
I think my number 4 is gonna be Amanda Nunes.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
That was how I had it wrote. I didn't switch it. I almost moved her up. I almost moved her up, but I don't think I can.
I think we all know who the top 3s are.
And, you guys heard everything that Dom had already said about Amanda Nunes.
Right.
Any woman fighter who was looked at as she's one of the best.
Ever, no matter what gender, what weight.
She has taken them all out.
Yeah.
Including, now, she didn't finish her or run through her, and they weren't particularly exciting fights. But she beat
Thank you. I did not touch on that.
She beat Valentina, the current dominant flyweight champion, twice.
Yeah.
Now, the second fight, I believe, is up for debate.
Yeah.
I don't really remember how I scored that one.
Thank you for bringing up those 2 wins.
Yeah, because, that's just adds to her list. As you mentioned, Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate, Valentina twice.
All finishes outside of Valentina.
Yeah.
All finishes.
And then Jermaine Durandamy, the inaugural
sort of
women's featherweight
technically
champion.
yes.
Yeah, and I know there's some. I hate that fight. I hate everything about that, but it is what it is. Look how impressive she was against Raquel Pennington. That's a fight that Raquel was literally on the stool before the 5th round saying that she quit.
Pennington's a very tough fighter, so to just dismantle her like that and make her want to quit says a lot.
And then the Chris Cyborg performance, which is probably the best of her career, I would say.
Oh, man.
That and the Rousey. Rousey, I think, now we look back and we go, yeah, that was probably how it was going to go. But, even after the Holly Holm loss, we were still... I remember those previews for that fight. And
no respect.
So focused on Rousey.
No respect for Amanda.
And understandably because of how big of a star she was, but Amanda was basically being pushed off to the side. Even Rogan on his podcast talked about how in the lead up to that fight, he was going, what are these people doing? Mm-hmm. And some media guy was at the fight, and I guess he was talking to someone, and he goes, look, I don't care who she is, she's chopped liver. And it was because he was so proud, that guy was so proud of the video package they made. He goes, I don't care who she's fighting, they're a goner. And it was wow. How you looked over her so poorly. And she's still doing it. By the end of her career, if she keeps going the way she's going, she could be number 1 on my list.
It really is a possibility.
Unfortunately for her, there's just nobody else.
There's no one
there. And Dana, what's funny is she started talking about potentially retiring, or at least has hinted at it. And Dana was like,
"You don't want that."
He's like, "I don't want that to happen." They're like, we are building these divisions around her.
Yeah.
So they just got to try to find some new blood, some new people that are going to get in.
Especially at 145.
Yeah, 145 was a division made for Chris Cyborg essentially because she couldn't cut the bantamweight.
Yeah.
And then look how Amanda ran through her, made it easy. A fight that I did not think she was going to win going into it.
No.
So, yeah, that's a lot of what you said earlier, so I won't, harp on it too long. But I just love watching Amanda Nunes fight. And the fact that she's remained so dominant. Her last loss was to Kat Zingano back, I believe that was, it was about 6 years ago.
2014, yeah.
So,
a
fight that went back and forth the whole time. Zingano, a girl that was at the top of the heap, there for a while.
Title challenger.
Yeah, so nothing to scoff at there. She has 4 losses on her record, but to see the growth from basically that first Shevchenko fight on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
She went from she just looks like a completely different fighter. She's bigger.
She's better every
stronger. Fight. She looks more fluid on the feet. She's a lot stronger on the ground. All of that is just it's been awesome to see her growth because it's really happened before our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you want to get into your number 4.
My number 4 is Demetrius.
Demetrius,
the Mighty Mouse himself. Again, you've already touched on it, so I won't have too much to say. Again, he broke Anderson Silva's title defense record. 11 straight title defenses. You can say all you want about the flyweights and how they're not fun to watch, they're not exciting, they're just not as good because they're so small. It doesn't matter. They say to be the champion, you have to defend your belt. Demetrius defended his belt 11 times and took on basically every number one contender there was. And I don't think that's something we see in present-day UFC as much. People kind of just fight, oh, here's the number 4 guy, but he's popular, so we're going to make that. Demetrius just fought whoever was put in front of him. It didn't matter who it was. Finishes, dominant decisions, close decisions. Like, it didn't matter. He found a way to win. And now he's, with one championship, and I'm pretty sure he's still dominating over there. I think he's their champion. Again, not bringing too much into other organizations, but it's hard to deny Demetrius on any top 10 list for the UFC. And I think for those reasons, as well as what Noah mentioned, is just kind of solidifies his spot. So, that's really all I have for number 4.
Okay.
There's nothing else to say.
What about your number 3?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure you and me are both going to have the same 1 through 3s, but just not the same spots.
Yeah.
And I'm probably about to shock a lot of people here in a second when I say my number 3. Maybe not. It's John Bones Jones for me. His number 3.
What's funny is that is also my number 3.
Okay.
So if people disagree with that, then we're really going to get
Yeah, right? At the end of the day, you could easily put John Jones at number 1. The guy has 1 loss in his entire career, and it's not even a loss. It's because he got disqualified.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable. He was that new breed of fighter that came into the UFC and was the youngest UFC champion ever. 22, 23 years old, which is just insane.
Beats Shogun Hua.
Beats Shogun, a legend of the sport. Dominated. The thing about John, man, the people he has beaten every former champion. He's beaten all of these new up-and-comers. Like, it is crazy the amount and the variety of people that he has beaten. The types of fighters. Like,
I'll break it down for you, the list here.
It's crazy.
Beats Shogun for the belt. Here's his defenses. Rampage Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans. Those are 3
legends.
Former champions.
Legends of MMA.
Vitor Belfort.
Legend.
Chael Sonnen.
A great fighter.
Yeah, no, a guy that was great, but the fact that I only laughed because Chael was a middleweight.
Right.
And he had to fill in, basically.
Yeah, exactly, to save a pay-per-view.
And then you had Gustafsson. Very close fight.
Gustafsson is an incredible fighter at 205. Let's ignore the fight he just had at heavyweight. That doesn't count.
And then he beats Glover Teixeira, a guy who's still surging today.
And then from here, this is where you see the new breed of fighters come in, I believe.
Daniel Cormier is the next one. And then that's where a lot of his troubles come in. And
yes. I have that on here. I know we didn't want to talk much about PEDs and outside of the octagon stuff, but when PEDs have a direct role on how you perform in the octagon, that's why I have him at 3. Just because I'm not calling him a cheater, we'll never know. But it's hard to have a guy at number 1 with that in mind.
Yeah, especially because it's happened multiple times.
Yeah, that's the thing. But
comes back, beats OSP,
up and comer at the time.
And then you have right before UFC 200, where he's set to fight Daniel Cormier.
He's going to be big.
Rematch. Literally, I believe it's like a day before, 2 days before.
Yeah, crazy.
He tests positive again, so that fight gets scrapped. And then Cormier ends up fighting Anderson Silva, a guy we will get to later. But he comes back and does rematch DC, wins the belt. It's a big triumph.
It was incredible. The head kick.
Yeah. The finishing sequence was incredible.
Unbelievable.
And then the next day he tests positive again.
And then it gets rolled into no contest.
So he comes back again and beats Gus for the second time, wins the belt.
In a way more dominant fashion.
And this is where we're going to kind of get into why I put him at number 3. It's not even the PEDs. So he dominates Anthony Smith. Okay, so we'll get that out of the way. He dominates Anthony Smith.
I know where you're going here with the next two fights.
His last two fights, I thought he lost both.
He's lost. John Jones is on a 2-fight losing streak, in my opinion.
To me, that fight with Thiago Santos.
Imagine have Thiago not tore his freaking knee to shreds.
Literally, he had to learn how to walk again.
Yeah.
And I thought he won.
And I still thought he won the fight.
And then Dominic Reyes, which I thought was even more clearly a win for Reyes than Santos even.
And I guess that's where the old saying, to beat the champ, you gotta beat the champ. I mean, that's where it comes into play.
Don't get me wrong, I still they are wins for him. They're wins for Jones, and they're he's not looking bad in these fights.
Dominic Reyes was undefeated.
Yeah, he's not looking bad in these fights by any means.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't say they're robberies, but I'm just saying that I do have to hold that.
We personally each feel.
And
that
I'll
he's
make
on
this point later. But
I
I mean, I did just say that Anderson Silva will be in my top 2, and I think that's a given. But if you looked at someone like Anderson Silva, not during his dominant run, name one fight where it was
nope.
Oh,
There's
that
not.
decision should have went the other way.
There's not, and that's why the other guy in our top 2 is going to be where he is on my list anyway. But
so yeah, I guess that's.
I mean, we both had number 3 the same, right? I guess that's all there is to say.
Anything else about John Jones?
He's incredible, man. I'm ready for him to fight again.
Let me put it like this:
I want him to fight.
He's
again.
number 3 on my GOAT list, but ultimately, I think he is the best mixed martial artist as far as
talking about someone that can literally do it all.
Yeah,
he's incredible.
I mean, I don't know if I could ever put him at number 1. Not because I have anything against him. I still.
I mean, we've in recent times we root for him.
Yeah, I like John Jones as a fighter. He's very exciting to watch. Say what you will about stuff outside of the octagon, but ultimately, I just don't know if he'll ever be able to get to number 1 for me because you do have the PEDs issue, the fact that it's reoccurring, and then these last 2 fights being. Now, if he rematches both those guys and does beat them decisively, then maybe we can move on from it. But we'll see if that happens. John's kind of
holding out right now.
Yeah, he's making some money moves right now, some negotiating. But so who's your number 2?
We might have the same top 3.
I don't know about that. Your number 2 is GSP.
My number 2 is GSP.
My number 2 is Anderson.
Okay,
Silva.
fair enough. George Rush St. Pierre. There's nothing else that needs said. No, I'm just kidding. 9 straight title defenses in the UFC. He was technically the champion twice. He won the belt, lost in the biggest upset, arguably in UFC history, outside of Holm and Rousey. Came back and dominated to get his belt back, and then went on. That's when the big, streak came along. Don't forget, after he retired the first time, he comes back up a weight class. At a weight class he really has no business being in. I didn't even really want to see that fight, but you can't deny that it happened. He beat a super tough, as tough as they come, Michael Bisping in a dominant way. I hated how he didn't defend the belt, even though it was technically in his contract. I don't know. I'm doing quotes right now. You guys can't see me, but that's what the rumor was. But GSP was another guy that took on every top contender, every single fight. He's 26-2,
Yep.
and both losses he has gotten redemption on. Matt Serra, and then his other loss is Matt Hughes, and he came back and he beat both. So I think that says a lot. If you lose to a guy and then never get the chance to run it back, then sometimes it's out of your control. But the fact that he ran it back and both times were finishes, if I'm not mistaken, I know Serra was for sure, that says a lot to me about adversity and just how improved he was every single fight. Yeah, man, GSP. And again, we mentioned this in our first episode. If he comes back next April against Habib and then beats Habib, these are a lot of what ifs and big ifs. But my God, man. He could easily take my number 1 if that were to happen.
Yeah.
But to me, he's my number 2. George St. Pierre.
So, my number 2 is the Spider.
Oh, man.
I know that hurt you.
That's all. No.
For those of you who don't know.
That is who I didn't touch on that in the first episode. Like, that is what made the UFC for me. Like,
Yeah.
that was the guy where I was like, holy moly, this is awesome.
Yeah.
This man is unbelievable.
Your favorite fighter of all time.
My favorite fighter of all time. Anderson Silva.
And I'm not saying that, like, putting Anderson Silva at number 1 is not, like, him showing bias. Like, that's legit.
Yeah.
Like, that's a legit. I mean, he is number 1, number 2, or number 3, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I.
You can't take him out of the top 3. There's
I
no
don't
way.
think so. The reason I put him at number 2, because I'm gonna let you probably talk about like all the positives, you know, like. I mean, but
I think I see where you're going to go with the negatives.
Yeah,
I think we discussed it.
I mean, I guess when I talk about if you look at the way I built my list out, there is a bit of it's like looking at the full resume, right? And instead of just looking at when they were on top. If
Yep.
it was when they were on top, Anderson Silva would be number 1.
Yep.
Because, well, him or John Jones. Because
Yeah.
I've never seen, literally, like I said, Anderson Silva, any fight that's went to a decision, you knew he won that
Yes.
fight.
Every
And most of the
single
time,
fight.
he was coming in and just running through.
Oh, it was crazy, man.
So that run was incredible. Had the record for a long time for consecutive title defenses. But ultimately, why I put him at number 2 is because since that.
Yeah, here it comes.
Yeah,
This is tough to listen to.
So he beat Stephen Bonner for that 11th title defense, and then basically that next fight is when he loses the belt to Chris Weidman, and from there, so starting at that fight, since then.
Name the year when that was, so they get a good idea.
2013.
This is 7 years ago.
And he last fought in May of 2019.
Yep. So over a
it's a
6-year
6 year
period, yeah.
He is 1-6, and then there's a new contest as well.
That hurts.
A fight that he won against Nick Diaz, but got overturned because he tested
So
positive.
he's 1-6-1.
Yeah. So ultimately, that is going to have a factor in mind,
Yep.
especially because when him and GSP, for me, they're so close. Like they're neck and neck.
Yeah.
But
In the
fact-
super fight that never happened, that
Yeah.
people always wanted at the time.
And that could have been
GSP versus
that could have been
Anderson.
the decide. That would have been the deciding
If that fight
vote.
would have happened, man, I can't even imagine.
So his losses, not saying they've been, bad.
In
but,
many,
Let
I'd
me look
say
at it. Let me look at
half
it.
of them could have been wins.
like, let's break him down here. He loses to Weidman twice.
That's his
First
fault.
time,
He got cocky.
got cocky, but Weidman was winning up until he knocked him out. Second,
But that wasn't uncommon in Anderson
No,
fights.
sure.
Because he felt people out a lot.
Right.
I'm not trying to make excuses. It sounds like I am.
Second Weidman fight again.
So,
Those two fights, it's like really weird. It's just like
yeah, well,
you almost feel like there was
he snapped
just,
his leg.
Yeah, like you just
You know.
Again, Weidman was winning the fight up until then, but it did happen a minute into the second round.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Then you have the Nick Diaz fight, which
Overturned. So it was a win.
then
Overturned.
his comeback fight against Michael Bisping, a fight
he literally knocked Bisping out.
Yes.
He knocked him out.
At the buzzer for the end of the third.
I don't remember what
forget
round.
which round it was, but it was like right at the buzzer.
Knock him out.
So the fight continues.
The fight continues on. Yeah.
Bisping wins by decision, but a fight that I think is up for controversy.
Yeah.
Then you have the fight with Daniel Cormier, where he came in on literally a day notice and fought.
A fight that didn't need to happen, but he did it because he wanted to save the brand and save the pay-per-view. So
nothing to be ashamed of there. Then
he
you
was
have-
fighting at 205 and
Yeah.
weighed in at 190 something pounds.
Yeah. So it really, that loss isn't like much of a loss, but then you have Derek Brunson, the fight he won.
That one I argue was a loss, though.
I feel like he kind of lost that fight.
Yeah.
But he looked very impressive against Israel Adesanya,
Yep.
the champion, the current middleweight champion, a fight that Adesanya wanted, and they both looked great in that fight.
Well, I mentioned this the other night. That truly, to me, just because of how rocky Anderson's title losses were, he lost to Weidman, but he kind of did that himself.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't get cocky, he would have never got caught like that. And then he snapped his leg in the rematch. Can't win your belt back that way.
Yeah.
So that, to me, now that Izzy is the champion of that division, that to me was truly the passing of the torch from the GOAT to what could very well be a future GOAT. So that to me was the true passing of the torch for that division and just kind of the old breed to the new breed in general.
And then what people kind of forget his last fight was against Jared Cannonier.
Another weird one.
Who's a title challenger right now.
Yeah.
And he, first round, they're just kind of feeling each other out. Cannonier throws a leg kick. Silva checks it, but it ends up like just messing up his knee.
Yeah,
or
that
something.
was it.
That was it. So
it's weird. Like,
weird.
you can't erase it, right? He's 1-6.
Yeah.
But they're weird fights.
So I don't think it's as bad as it looks on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's still competitive, and there's a lot of rumors about him and Anthony Pettis, which is a fight I would really like to see.
Yeah.
But I guess to compare to my number one pick of George St. Pierre, St. Pierre basically, he has 2 losses, both earlier on in his career. His first loss to Matt Hughes in 2004, and then to Matt Serra as his first title defense, actually. The biggest, one of the biggest upsets ever.
Oh, yeah.
In 2007. But yes, as you mentioned, he comes back, avenges both of them.
That's really big to me.
And the big factor why I put him at number one, and really, you pointing that out, I really didn't even think about that. Like, that would even be more of a reason. But it is the fact that, really, he has the one controversial decision.
That's what I was going to say. The only blunder of his entire 28-fight career
is the Johnny Hendricks fight.
Johnny Hendricks.
And I completely understand
And that's
that.
where he kind of relates to the John Jones factor.
Yeah. So, I get that. I just think that the fact that he even came back, like, he goes out on top, right? Yes, I know there's a lot of controversy with that decision, but he leaves the champion.
He did leave on top.
He comes back, wins another belt, and has a lot of apparent issues after that with, like, his health.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't defend it. But ultimately, him being able to sustain that level of success from start to finish in his career is why I put him above Anderson Silva. Because I do have to take in my way of ranking, I'm taking into account the entire picture, their entire career.
I completely understand.
And that's why I put him at number one. So.
And then, of course, my number one, we just flip-flopped. It's Anderson. Mm-hmm. We've already talked about it. Just quick notes, 10 straight title defenses, as we mentioned, the most ever outside of Demetrius, who had 11. And in total, Anderson Silva had a 16-fight win streak in the UFC. And I think a lot of people don't think about how dominant he was and how he fought at 205 multiple times and had finishes against these guys. He was the first guy to, like, outside of Randy, really, if you think about it, that was so prominent in the UFC and fluctuating back and forth between 2 weight classes. And I just think it's incredible. Again, his record is 34-10, and we already talked about, the negatives and how it's went downhill the last few years. But I think it's easy. The 1 through 3 spots could change so easily depending on who's making the list. Yeah. But at the end of the day, how many people are going to have any different of a 1 through 3?
I can't imagine. I
can't think of
the only person I could see someone saying Amanda Nunes or Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah.
I could see someone putting those 2 in the top 3.
Mm-hmm.
But Amanda Nunes, I was very close to putting Jones at 4 and her at 3. I was very close. So, like, by the end of her career, if Mighty Mouse ever comes back, which I don't know if that'll happen, it could very well change. But as it stands today, I don't see how you put
anybody else in the top 3. And then the top 3 just fluctuates depending on. There's always going to be a little bias on who makes the list, and then it's just.
You had
it's
me
all
talking
opinion.
about Stipe. I don't think a lot of people would put him in their top 10.
Yeah.
I technically haven't, but if he wins Saturday,
might on
he
Saturday
is in my top 10. Ultimately, I'm surprised. We
had more similarities than I think we both thought we would.
Yeah, obviously I was a little surprised with, like, Cruz and Aldo being that high, but you
our
explained
4 and 5s.
You explained it well.
Were
but I had Chuck and then Randy Couture.
Yeah, so we each had 2 people that aren't in our list at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me was Dominic and Jose, and yours was Randy and Chuck. Everybody else, I think, was the same people, just different
Cormier,
spots, right?
Holloway. Habib.
John, Anderson, George.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, man. I mean.
Just a few spots changed around, but I was a
Yeah.
little surprised that because there's a lot of fighters that if you really look at the history, that
It's tough.
you got guys like BJ Penn. The reason he's not on mine is he hasn't won a fight in a decade.
Yeah.
And, you just can't.
It's hard to make these lists.
Conor McGregor could be on a list.
He
like
could
this.
be. Yeah.
Frankie Edgar. I mean, the list goes on. Cain Velasquez. You could talk.
Yeah, a year from now, we could make a whole nother podcast and have a whole different list.
I'm sure we will.
We really will.
But
I mean,
yeah. So.
But as of today, that
is
is the top 10 UFC GOATs. Hence the thumbnail of this podcast.
So I guess just to kind of wrap up here, just be on the lookout for more episodes this Friday.
It's a big one.
So excited.
It's a big one, ladies and gentlemen.
UFC 252.
The trilogy.
Yes. We are going to be breaking down the entire main card and anything else that stands out to us.
Any news that happens the rest of the week.
Yeah.
We might maybe talk about the Contender Series a little bit.
Yeah,
We'll see what happens Tuesday.
Yeah. So very excited for that card, obviously. And then I'm going to go ahead and mention next Monday we will be having our UFC 252 recap episode.
Yes. So to give them an idea of a schedule, I know you mentioned the Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing. Basically, for our previews and recaps, we will have a preview video going up basically every Friday for fight nights or pay-per-views that occur on Saturdays. And then we will have a recap of that event that goes up the following Monday. That's kind of the plan.
Yeah. So.
And then the special episodes like this one, we plan to do Wednesdays or whatever days work out best for us.
Yeah.
But it'd be great to stick around a Monday, Wednesday, Friday type schedule.
So we're trying to do Wednesdays. They're not going to happen probably every week.
Every other.
Yeah, we'll just see how it goes. This week was a big one because it's our first week doing this. Obviously, the big pay-per-view on Saturday.
It's a great week.
It's a great week to get started.
Yeah.
So, Dom, tell the good people where they can find you on the internet.
Well, you can find me personally on Instagram, Twitter, dsalee14. But more importantly, you can follow our very own Below Average Joe podcast Instagram and future Twitter, but not yet. Our Instagram is Below Average Joe's _podcast. We will attempt our best to post some behind-the-scenes pictures of us recording, maybe some fun videos, and of course, we'd love to get some clips on there of what you guys can expect for upcoming videos. So that's kind of the plan there. Keep us on top of it. Make sure we post stuff.
Yep.
That's your guys' job.
Yep. Very well said, Dom. Y'all can find me on Instagram and Twitter as well at ntbaker_, and follow us on our podcast Instagram, and be on the lookout for, if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, we're going to be posting a lot as these episodes come out, just trying to get the word out, trying to get more people to watch and keep everybody up to date on what we're doing.
And also, sorry I cut you off.
Go ahead.
Don't forget, now these podcasts right now are exclusively on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So, ring the bell. Get your notifications when a video goes live. Mm-hmm. Subscribe so you're ready no matter what time of day. If you want to listen to us when you go to bed at night, our voices are soothing, I'd imagine. Go to bed listening to us. Wake up, listen to us. Go to the gym and listen to us. I don't care. But we're bringing our knowledge. And that's what I got to say. Subscribe to the channel, man.
Yeah, just like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And with that, we're going to be out of here, and we will see y'all on Friday.
Be ready, everyone. It's going to be a doozy.